Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Bob Plankers. I am a senior technical marketing architect with VMware Corporation. It's my pleasure to be here, honestly. Without any doubt, I really enjoy the idea of talking about the I hate this saying softer side of it, but the non-technical side of things. Us technical marketing folks talk about the technology a lot. We can talk about a lot of the product. I focus on vSphere security. I've added compliance to that when I first joined VMware in 2018. After 23 years out in the field, out in in enterprise IT, doing all of this stuff, leading infrastructure teams, things like that. I came to VMware, and I really have started enjoying talking about compliance. Maybe it's Stockholm syndrome. Maybe I've been spending too much time with those folks. They tell horrible jokes. I'm a dad joke sort of guy, and you'll be lucky if you get through this without a pirate joke or something. But talking about vSphere admins and their roles in IT security. We always think about InfoSec as being where all that stuff happens. And when it comes to security, I tend to dislike sayings like, if you're not with us, you're against us. But when it comes to security, that's the deal. And, I dislike those sayings because nothing in life is that cut and dried. It's nothing is pure good, nothing is pure evil. We all exist in this gray area in the middle, and that's what compliance is. That's what security is. It's a lot of trade-offs. Security, to a lot of people, to junior admins, security is this nerd knob you tweak. You turn it to 11. You add all the security controls, and then if you're lucky, that junior admin evolves to realizing that's a lot of work. That's stuff you've got to maintain, all that sort of stuff. And so, security is this thing that we evolve into it. There's differing roles. Our understanding of the roles are misunderstood. They're misunderstood. Who does what? Everybody does everything, and how did we get into this? How did a guy like me out in enterprise IT, just leading an infrastructure team, just minding my own business? Seriously, how did I end up here? How did I end up doing this stuff? And why? My favorite question is why. And so let's talk about it a little bit. Talking about compliance, it's my belief that the way most of us get into security is through compliance. Our boss shows up and says, "Hey, we've got a compliance audit coming up. I need you to work on it." And you can say, "Well, but I don't do security," which is a lie. We just talked about that. But, your naive, older version of you, past version of you thought that, I don't do security. And then your boss says, "Well, I don't really care. I'm not really asking." And, well, that's that. So you go to the meeting, you go sit in the kickoff meeting for the audit. You talk to the auditors. There's some dude with a scanner report. They scanned everything, and oh my goodness, it's all red, and we're all gonna die, clearly. And so, but compliance is serious business. It's compliance regulations, regulatory requirements help get your business to be able to operate in an industry sometime. If you're an energy company, you need it to operate in to generate power, to do stuff. PCI, if you want to take credit cards, you need a payment card industry certification, and you need to follow their standard, the PCI DSS. And that's how, and these regulations are normalized across the whole industry. And so that's how they keep score. And that's how they, and I get it. And we love to hate it, but that's the deal. It's just, we just need to accept it. And so you go sit in the meeting, somebody's got a scanner report, and they hand it to you, like, make it all green, and you look at it and you go, oh crap, that's, what am I going to do with this? And so you start asking some questions, and there maybe aren't good answers. At least in my past, there aren't real good answers that you're getting. They're sort of nebulous, and the scanner output doesn't really help, and that. So you go and you look up the security, you look up the standards themselves. NIST 800-53, revision 5 just came out on the 5th of October here. And so I'm, again, feels weird to say it, but I'm actually stoked. 800-53 is a really interesting generic compliance framework. PCI's got good ideas in it as well, and they've done a good job. If you go out to the PCI website, they've got a nice rundown, just a getting started, how to get started in it, security concepts, because security is a process when it comes right down to it, and that's what you end up sort of developing here. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyhow, so you look this up, and you look up you've got the compliance report, and you look up the actual requirements, and you say these don't match. Like what the scanner's checking for is actually not what the PCI spec is requiring. And so you go back and ask questions. Maybe you dig up an implementation guide, and then you start realizing implementation guides. This is a picture of the brand new security configuration guide for vSphere 7. I just released it the other day as well with vSphere 7 Update 1, which is highly recommended. It's a cool piece of software. And the implementation guides are what to do, but they don't tell you why. Compliance guides are why you should do something and where you need to end up, but they don't tell you how. And so ideally, the two of them, you start figuring out, hey, wait a second, can I get these in match sets? And no, actually VMware supplies some compliance kits that have both an implementation guide. We call it a product applicability guide, and we should just call it an implementation guide now that I think about it, and the audit stuff as well. Search for that. It's part of the VMware validated designs if you're into this stuff. But anyhow, I digress, and that'll happen. But you start looking at this, and then you start looking at tools, and at some point here, you wonder, why isn't InfoSec doing this? Why am I stuck with this? But you look at tools, you look at the scanners, you look at the scanner output, and hey, can we tweak this? You look at other tools. Maybe there's a different scanner. Maybe with what I know now about PCI and things like that, maybe we can have a different scanner, and maybe we'll have more favorable results or something like that. This is actually a screenshot of Carbon Black workload. CB workload was announced at VMworld this year. I think there's a free trial, like a 6-month trial of it that starts in November. Sign up for it. I'm actually, what excites me these days is probably disturbingly boring is what it amounts to. Carbon Black workload is vulnerability management, and it's both in the CB cloud, so security people can see it, but it also shows up as a tab in the vSphere client. And so when they ask you, when InfoSec comes, knocks on your door and says, hey, there's a new 0-day out, and you go, yeah, I know, because I subscribe to all the alert email lists and things. They go, oh, okay, so what's vulnerable to it? And you go, why are you asking me? Well, they don't know. And so this helps you. You can drill right down into it. But anyhow, again, I digress. The tools are part of the whole equation, but they're not. It's more about process. It's not about a particular tool. It's not about a particular implementation guide, things like that. And so, you're walking this path, and you're starting to gain knowledge, and you're starting to gain, what you're gaining here is the answer to one of your initial questions, which was, why can't InfoSec do this work? Why aren't they doing it? I didn't sign up for this. This is not part of my job description. And so at its very core, InfoSec is a policy organization. The CISO is a policymaker. And fearmonger, frankly, but I say that actually out of love. CISOs are the chief scapegoat officer of an organization. If anything goes wrong, their head is on the chopping block, and that's not cool. But so they set policy to try to keep bad things from happening. People find nature finds a way. People find ways around it and stuff like that, and that's what they're fighting. And so. That policy, they try to tread the line with the trade-offs in security as well. Security, I mentioned this earlier, that security and usability often trade off with each other. And I think back, I had a chief operating officer at one point that used to quip that we should remind the InfoSec folks that we bought systems to use them. which seems a little harsh, but it's a good reminder that, that we're trading things off. That junior admin turning things to 11, there's costs to that. There's opportunity costs, there's usability costs, there's all sorts of stuff. And that as you develop this process, as you go down this road, you figure it out. So what is InfoSec doing? Well, they can't do this work because they're busy doing incident response and threat hunting. The two of them are related. Threat hunting is mostly just finding an incident that's so early that it can be the damage can be walked back, or deeper damage can be prevented. Intrusion detection, prevention, EDR, things like that. Incident response, straight up, is just some meathead found that works for your company, found a USB drive out in the parking lot labeled beach photos, and they want to see what's on it. And what's the secret about USB devices that you don't absolutely trust, weren't in a shrink wrapped thing and kept under lock and key? Well, they probably have malware on them. Honestly, don't accept USB devices from conferences and things like that. They have malware on them. And so, yeah, and malware nowadays is ransomware, and ransomware is seriously scary stuff. They sit in your network waiting. They inventory your network, and they do vulnerability scans, and they sit and they wait until there's a 0 day, like zero logon. And then they create themselves a domain admin account, and it is scary stuff. And so that's what InfoSec is worried about. And they're busy doing that. They're burning their budget on that. In the meantime, they're also doing audits. They're burning budget on audits and things, trying to keep the business able to operate in the industry that you want to operate in, taking payment cards, energy sector, you name it, whatever, education, biological research, whatever you're up to. If there's regulatory guidelines, they're helping audit. They set policy, and then they audit for it. Who does the implementation? You do. I do. The vSphere admins, the IT folks do. And because the truth of it is, InfoSec, one, doesn't have access to that stuff into the infrastructure. They're not the people running it. They're not on call for it, that sort of thing. And so we need to be deeply involved in the middle of it. But two, they don't really know that much about vSphere. And it's not their job. Why isn't InfoSec doing this? Because they don't know. It's just straight up not their job. And that's one of the misunderstandings of the whole thing. And so we get roped into doing it. Hey, can you participate in this compliance audit? Yeah, I can do it. And the next thing you know, you're knee deep in the whole thing, and you're looking at these things and you're trying to translate between something that doesn't have any idea of what controls need to happen, but knows what you need to do. It's got process. It's got, hey, you need two-factor authentication. Hey, you need to have perimeter firewalls. Hey, you need to, send your logs somewhere, that sort of thing. But it doesn't tell you exactly how. You are the person that does that translation. And you add tremendous value to that process. Consultants get paid big bucks to do that. You learn how to do it, you can get paid big bucks too, or at least save your company some money in that regard. And we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. You should get something back out of this whole process. The other thing too is these implementation guides. Implementation guides seem like the way to go, but even with a prepackaged implementation guide, I'd like to joke about compliance that no compliance effort ever survived contact with a real application. And compliance frameworks are great because they have the idea of compensating controls. All of the line items in there are known as controls. And the idea that if you can't meet a control directly, you can kind of come at it sideways and compensate for it in other ways. And that's really nice. It's flexible. Implementation guides are completely inflexible. They are not. They're not designed. They're pass fail. You get a score, and if your score stinks, then you fail, and you should reconsider your life. As far as they're concerned, as far as I'm concerned, it's all negotiable, and that's part of the deal here. It's all negotiable. But now, because you're part of this, you can help translate the implementation guides into business needs. You can help prioritize, actually. That's the biggest part of this, is the priorities. People get carts and horses mixed up, the ordering of them quite often, like especially with scanners. You'll discover, so in all of this, you discover that a scanner is it's really just an implementation guide, and it's even worse than that because it's giving you a score, and it's giving you a score in a really authoritative way. And a lot of that stuff is it works beyond the implementation guides, or it works beyond the standards. Not only should you be secure to the standard, it thinks you should be secure past that. And I'm not going to argue with that. That's a really great idea. But in terms of a compliance audit, in terms of a business priority, if you've got a serious gap somewhere else, you don't want to go in the weeds chasing. We see this a lot with TLS cipher suites. There's TLS 1.2 is getting a little old, and there's some cipher suites in it that aren't necessarily as great as we'd like. And so, the scanners will say, hey, you should shut those off. Well, but if you haven't patched in 2 years, what's the bigger problem? The massive vulnerabilities you're subject to, or your cipher suites? So, again, you add tremendous value to this process. You can help prioritize. The truth is that your coworkers, your coworkers don't know how to do this, and so you're learning how to do that. You're translating. You're making their life easier for them. Your boss probably doesn't know how to do this either. Your boss has got the CISO whispering FUD in their ear. And, like if we don't do this, we're all going to perish. And, we're all going to get hacked, and we're going to end up in court, massive lawsuits, all that sort of stuff. And that might be true, sure. But, again, it's a priority. And so you become a person that can help with this process. And you add value. And something you didn't sign up for ends up kind of being a gift if you're willing to accept it, like a weird door opening that you walk through. Speaking of weird, I put this in here mostly as a joke. You end up as actually the slide is totally serious, and I really like this slide. Actually, this is a Gartner slide. I really like it, but I was going to joke about it because you end up at the end of this process, you end up understanding a slide like this, and you understand what it means. You can look at it. You can look at the bottom of it and say, hey, we don't have that, or we're doing that poorly, or whatever. And now, and now you're starting to think about this. This is the value you bring to this whole thing. And so, this is about professional development. And so the answer, talking about the expanding role of vSphere admins in IT security, well, that's just a given. It's a team. Security is a team sport. One of our senior vice presidents, Tom Corn over in our security business unit, the former Carbon Black, he likes to talk about security as a team sport a lot, and I agree. He and I have had some conversations about that. I agree completely. You can pick which team. It's probably not a football team. It's more probably like a swim team, perhaps a whole lot of relays on a swim team, but it's a team effort. Everyone has to be involved. There's nobody that's not involved in security. But now you're involved more in security. You're involved in compliance. That mystical world of compliance where you've basically learned their dirty secrets, that the compliance folks really don't know that much about what they're auditing. And you need to help them with it. It's an educational thing. It's not a criticism, or it really isn't. It's just a people problem we need to be cognizant of. So what do we do moving forward? Professional development, right? We want to develop as professionals. One, if you're going to stick around with this, when the compliance audit is over, it's not going to be over, right? And you're going to get stuck with it the next time around. These happen periodically. Get it as part of your position description. If it's part of your job, make it part of your job officially. And that way you can be evaluated against it as well, and with that should come raises. Your organization is saving a ton of money by developing this expertise in-house. And so versus contracting with a third party to do it, that sort of thing. And you're probably bringing in third-party auditors in a lot of cases, but actually the remediations of things is something that you can, your organization saves a lot of money by having you drive that. And so have them, share the benefits there. They're not going to see it that way. They will see it as money they saved, or they won't even see it as money saved, but express the value to it. But at the very least, get it as part of your position description. Make it an official part of your job so that, like I said, you can be evaluated against it. Work to see the bigger picture. These are all business problems. You've now entered the realm of mating technical solutions to business needs. And that's not a junior admin sort of thing. That's a senior admin sort of thing. That's a principal architect. That's the course you're on. And seeing the forest, being able to see the trees. Sometimes I'm a real big advocate of people. You can't always have a high level view. Senior people need to get down in the trenches once in a while, because you get down in the trenches and you look around and you go, oh my goodness, this is a mess. We can clean this up. And so, junior admins should not be left alone that long on their own recognizance, but senior admins, people seeing the bigger pictures, the business, being able to make business needs to technical solutions, and being able to prioritize. Honestly, the priorities are huge. Even firing up a copy of Microsoft Project, again, seems like not even Project, Excel. Just map out a project in Excel. What are the steps that we need to do here? Make it a team effort, that sort of thing. And because you're getting everyone else to help you too, and they're going to love you because you are participating in the security process. You're making their life easier because you're one of them, right? The compliance and InfoSec people think you're one of them as well, because you know their secrets. You're totally cool with it because you understand, right? You get that. They can't. They've got other pressures and things like that, and they're being blamed for things. But you can work like that. And as far as InfoSec goes, you can start speaking in their language. InfoSec people talk about the CIA triad all the time. They're not talking about the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. They're talking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And this right here is the key to a security person. If you're a curious person, a security person can have their fingers in everything, because absolutely everything in IT falls into one of these categories if it relates at all to risk, and it should. It usually does. Confidentiality, keeping our data to ourselves. The idea that this is usually what people think of as security. Oh, the nerd knobs and things like that. But it's straight up just keeping the bad actors away from our data, keeping it to ourselves. Integrity. Ransomware speaks to this. When I leave data somewhere, when I leave a system somewhere, I want to return to it and have it be in the condition I expect it to be in. I don't want bit rot. I don't want attackers encrypting all of my stuff. If there is a problem, I want to be able to restore a backup and not discover that's encrypted too. Ransomware is serious, insidious stuff. And then availability. Availability always gets short shrift because it costs money. And that extra power supply, do we really need it? Well, yeah, you do. But do we really need 2 domain controllers in each site? Yeah, you do. That sort of things, and those sorts of things. And now, because you've been part of these processes, you can speak to the need for availability in terms of risk, in terms of what it buys you for a compliance audit, and you can be a little manipulative. I'm not above being manipulative at all in this regard. Hey. I know you didn't want to pay for an extra Windows license for that extra DC in each of our data centers, but this would really help. These sorts of things are really what helps speed compliance audits and compliance work and things like that. And they look at them, we spend a lot of time on that. Maybe it's worth it. It is. And so you can use that terminology and make a business case for it. I mentioned too, as far as bigger pictures, I love this slide. This is from the Adobe stock library. It's an amp with 11 on it. I didn't even know such things existed. I don't play guitars. I sang back in the day. I drum on my belly in the shower, but that's about the extent of my musical career. But Turning security to 11, the nerd knobs to 11, putting it all in there, that's another big picture thing. Don't do that. Encourage, and you can help educate. You know, maybe your role is not as an educator, but you can apply a little pressure. Again, hey, you're making my life more difficult by hurting the compliance audits. You know, please stop doing that. Oh, sorry, Bob. You know, yeah, no problem. You know, now we talked about it. And then, you know, helping teams prioritize. Looking at a compliance, when a new compliance regulation comes out, you know there's going to be another audit. You can get ahead of it. You can do scans. Go and ask. One of my favorite things was going and asking to have access to the scanner software. And the security people, their answer to everything is no. You know, and no. You know, why do you need it? Well, I want to scan. I want to do what you're doing. I want to scan the infrastructure ahead of time so that these audits go faster. Well, no, we'll do that. Okay. Well, what are you worried about? Well, you'll have access to the scan results. Yeah. Well, then you'll know the vulnerabilities. Yeah, and then I can work to fix them. Well, what are you worried about? Well, if you know the vulnerabilities, you can break in. I have privileged access to the whole infrastructure anyhow. And they go, oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, let me create an account for you. And it's a process for them too. These are all just people problems, and you know, plotting the course over. I'm sorry, I forgot I had this cool graphic here. I like this one. Plotting the course across rocky terrain. You know, that's the rocky terrain is IT. You're gonna discover on the path. You're gonna think that you're on a good path, and then there's gonna be a 0 day in there. You're going to think that you're doing all right, and they're going to change the compliance frameworks, or you're going to get a new auditor. That's almost the worst is breaking in a new auditor, because then you have to teach them all kinds of new stuff. And but you're going to be able to, and that's really cool. And then I keep saying this, remember, it's just all a people problem. And, you know, being kind, remembering to one, and reminding others of two, that the infrastructure belongs to the organization. It doesn't belong to InfoSec. It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong, if anything, it belongs to the CEO, you know, that's ultimately responsible for it. But you're all in it together. And so you need to find solutions together, solutions that are respectful of IT folks' staff time. I talk a lot about this when I talk about certificate management and things, the urge to replace all certificates in vSphere with custom certificates, which is just a staff time nightmare, and it introduces human error and risk there and things like that. You know, that stuff you need to be cognizant of too. And being in the position that you're in as a vSphere admin, as an IT person, as a sysadmin, you can help defend yourself and help defend your coworkers against the ideas that aren't well thought out, you know, that sort of thing. So this pretty much wraps it up. You know, I'm hoping that this plants some seeds. I really like the idea of planting seeds and getting people thinking about things. And so if that did that for you, I'm glad. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being our customers. Thanks for supporting VMUG and watching this. And yeah, I hope I run into you. I miss getting out. I hope you're all safe and happy and sane still. And if you're not, I hope that that situation corrects itself. So take care of yourselves, okay? And thank you very much.